Howdy again everyone. Well, you all requested the following video, so by popular demand, here's a comparison of the brand new Sigma 28-105mm f2.8 with the bigger Tamron 35-150mm f2.2 and monstrous Canon RF 24-105mm f2.8L. Just look at them there. Any one of these camera lenses would be a dream come true for any wedding or portrait photographer, photojournalist, video maker, well, anyone really. They are simply the most impressive and versatile zoom lenses available today, and I've decided to call these things super fast standard zoom lenses because they each go beyond the usual 24-70mm f2.8 that we are all generally used to. The Sigma lens is the least expensive of the three at £1,400 in the UK or $1,500 US. It's also the smallest and lightest at 990 grams, and it's available on Sony E and also on L mount cameras. It has the smallest zoom range of the three lenses, although 28-105mm at f2.8 is still seriously impressive and useful. It and the Tamron lens do not have image stabilization, so you should bear that in mind, but then again, virtually all Sony cameras nowadays have stabilization built in. Next comes the Tamron lens at £1,800 here in the UK or $1,800 US, currently under discount from $1,900, and it's available on the Sony E and Nikon Z mount cameras. It's considerably bigger and heavier than the Sigma lens, weighing 1.16 kilograms. And finally, the Canon lens, which costs an eye-watering £3,500 here in the UK or $3,000 in the US. It is exclusively for Canon's RF mount mirrorless cameras. It's the biggest lens of the three, and at 1.43 kilograms, really quite heavy. Shooting a wedding with this thing would be exhausting. Each of the lenses project a full-frame image circle, and if you want to see more in-depth reviews of them, I've put links in the description below to each one. Each one was also loaned to me for a week or two by their respective manufacturers for testing. The build quality of all three lenses is quite similar. They're each made of a mixture of heavy-duty plastics and metal, although the Tamron lens has a smoother finish to it. All three come with hoods, all three feature weather sealing, all three have focus hold buttons and other useful controls on the side, and all three feature excellent manual focus control and smooth turning zoom rings. When it comes to autofocus, each three have focus motors that work silently, accurately and responsively, not to mention very quickly. For fastest results with the Tamron and Sigma lenses on Sony cameras, shoot in continuous autofocus mode. Talking about focusing, when it comes to focus breathing, all three lenses perform in a remarkably similar way. They all display almost no focus breathing when zoomed in, and when zoomed out, they each only suffer from a little breathing, which is legitimately impressive and very useful for video work. It's great to see that being corrected so well. The Sigma and Canon lenses both feature aperture rings, which can be useful for video makers and more tactile photographers who appreciate such things. Overall, well, all three lenses have remarkably similar, excellent build quality and useful features, especially for video work. The key differences between them lie in their size and weight, and in the Canon lens being image stabilized and the Tamron lens lacking an aperture ring. Alright then, image quality. The Sigma and Tamron lenses I'm testing on a Sony a7R3 with its 42 megapixel full frame sensor. The Canon lens was tested on a 45 megapixel EOS R5 camera, but in the interest of fairness, I'll zoom the test image into the same level as the other two lenses. In-camera corrections were turned on for this test. At their respective widest angles and brightest apertures, all three lenses are razor sharp in the middle of their images. All three are pretty sharp in their image corners, stopped down to f4 or f5.6, and all three are looking fantastic in their image corners now. Let's zoom them all into their respective halfway points. The maximum aperture of the Tamron lens, zoomed in a bit more to 85mm, has now darkened to f2.8. Again, all three lenses are razor sharp in the middle of their images. Now let's look into the corners. The Tamron lens is very slightly sharper than the other two. This time the Canon lens is a little softer. stop down to f4 for slight improvements for the Sigma and Tamron lenses. For the Canon lens though, you need to stop its aperture down to f5.6 for extra sharpness in those corners. Well, let's zoom all three lenses into their respective longest focal lengths now. At f2.8, all three lenses are still looking great, although the Sigma is slightly lacking in contrast. In their image corners, all three lenses are showing a little softness. Stop down to f4 for a mild improvement in all three, and at f5.6, all three are looking fairly sharp now. So again, there isn't a huge difference in image quality between the three lenses at all, and they all offer plenty of sharpness, although stop down a little for best results in their image corners. The Tamron lens did seem to have a slight edge over the other two, though I was frankly blown away by its sharpness. Perhaps starting at 35mm instead of a wider angle really was a big help to its optical designers. Well, for those interested, let's take a look at distortion and vignetting if in-camera corrections are turned off. The Canon lens suffers the worst here. At its widest angle of 24mm, its corners are literally black, so you must correct your raw images here. And barrel distortion is very strong too, and that flips into strong pincushion distortion when you zoom in. The Sigma lens also suffers from pretty strong distortion levels here, again barrel distortion at the wide end, flipping into pincushion as you zoom in. The Tamron lens fares much better at its widest angle, but then again that's only 35mm, and it too suffers from pincushion distortion when you zoom in. All three lenses suffer from vignetting at their brightest apertures, so on all three lenses you really must be sure to keep image corrections turned on and make sure your raw files are properly corrected as well. When it comes to close-up shooting, the Tamron lens cannot shoot as closely as the other two can. All three suffer from various image quality problems when shooting at their widest aperture, as you can see. When stopped down a little, all three lenses improve, and at f5.6, the Sigma and Tamron lenses look excellent, the Canon lens just good. Something I should mention though is that the Tamron lens is a little sharper close-up when it's zoomed out rather than zoomed in. When it comes to working against bright light, the Canon and Sigma lenses perform very well, only showing small amounts of flaring when you're zoomed in. The Tamron is much worse though, showing quite a bit of flaring across its zoom range. When it comes to chroma levels, all three lenses barely exhibit any chroma smearing at all on bright points of light. When it comes to sun stars, when stopped down to f8, the Tamron and Sigma lenses are very impressive, but the Canon lens only really starts offering quite mild sun stars at f11 or so. And finally, when it comes to bokeh, all three lenses again perform very nicely here. The Tamron and Canon lenses could sometimes demonstrate a slight busyness in very complicated backgrounds here, the Sigma lens a bit less so, although it struggled with its specular highlights just a little bit if those highlights were bright enough. Whoa, okay, it took a lot of work for me to put all that together. I hope you found it helpful. Generally, all three lenses are amazingly similar in terms of their build quality and their optical performances, even down to issues like focus breathing. The Tamron lens seemed to be a little sharper than the other two, which is a major achievement for them, but then again, the fact that it starts at 35mm instead of a wider angle would have made it much easier to design. It's the widest angle of a zoom lens that tends to make the most difference to its optics and to its size and weight, rather than the telephoto end. If you were to ask me personally which lens I would go for, it'd have to be the Tamron for that extra zoom range and brightness at 35mm. But then again, it's a slightly unfair comparison because the Tamron lens does cost $400 more than the Sigma. The Canon lens attracts me enormously because of its extremely useful widest angle of 24mm, something the other lenses can only dream of, but its size and weight, not to mention enormous price, means that this thing really is for specialist work using tripods. I wouldn't be able to shoot a wedding with it, it's just too big and heavy. The Sigma lens, well, that's the smallest, lightest and most affordable of the bunch, and it can zoom out a little wider than a Tamron lens, making it slightly more useful for general purpose shooting. By the way, if you're interested in the Tamron lens but want to spend a bit less money, then check out Samyang's knockoff version. It's much cheaper and only a little lower quality. I'll put a link in the description for that review too. Anyway, each one of these 3 lenses is basically a dream come true to use, if you can afford them, that is. Have fun making up your own mind on whether one of these lenses is worth saving up for you.